Now, he's a well-known speaker all over the world, so I want you to get on your feet and give a real warm welcome to Blaine Bartlett.
Good. Hey. Thank you. Good afternoon.
You can do better than that. Come on. Good afternoon.
Noon. One more time with feeling. That's good. Good. Bob has asked me to talk a little bit about something that's actually quite dear to my heart, which has to do with the nature of spirit. And I mean this not in a religious sense in any way, shape, or form, but in the context in which he's been talking about it. You know, when you think of the spirit of opulence or entering into the spirit of it, it has something to do with everything that we do in our lives. So, as Bob mentioned, I work all over the world, and while I'm not quite as old as he is, I have been working in this field since about 1976. So I've got some history. And one thing that has struck me, and this is where I think it might be useful for you guys, most of my work is with organizations. I work with individuals in organizations. Now, when you think of an organization, what do you think of? What is an organization? I'll just start with that. How would you answer the question? What is an organization? Group of like-minded people. Anybody else? With a common objective. Like-minded people with a common objective. What else might you add into that mix? Organized. There's some organizing principle, ideally. Okay? Simply, all an organization is, and this is, I think, fundamentally important, all an organization is a collection of people that are in relationship. That's all an organization is, whether it's a family system or an incredibly large, mega, multinational organization. It's a collection of people that are in relationships. Now, you listen to that and you kind of go, yeah, and? What's the big deal about that? Well, when I talk about relationships, most people will default to thinking about the interpersonal relationships that are so visible. My relationship with you, your relationship with him, your relationship with her. And in one sense, to the degree that these relationships work well, you're going to have a pretty harmonious and effective organization. That, however, is only the tip of the iceberg. We have relationship with everything. Relationship with goals, with vision. There's a relationship with values. Relationship with my desk. Relationship with parking places. Relationship with the pen that I use. As I walk across this floor, I have a relationship with gravity. And to the degree that relationships in all of their forms are working well, the organization's got a pretty good chance of being successful. Leaders, and this is where my focus is, leaders, by and large, do not pay attention to relationships. In most organizations, leaders pay attention to outcomes, to results. That's myopic, it's focused, it's very, very, very intense in terms of the gaze. And what happens in that process is things get missed. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about with you today, because as you look at the Matrixx and what it means to you and your future, I mean, I know Peggy and Brian led you through a little exercise yesterday that is about visioning. Sandy talked about visioneering today. Vision is a large part of how we actually move forward in life. And there's more to it than that. And that's what I want to unbundle just a little bit here. And in the short period of time that I've got, what we begin to look at here is taking this process of running our businesses, developing our businesses, and hopefully gaining a little bit more understanding about what we as leaders can bring to the trajectory of our success. And I start almost every talk I give with this little poem. And if I can find the right, there we go. The range of what we think and feel and do is limited by what we fail to notice. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little that we can do to change. Now, Bob has been talking about this all day long. Sandy's been talking about this all week long. If you've been in the paradigm shift programs, this is about awareness of the paradigm. What is operating that is out of sight, out of mind in the subconscious? Because we don't notice it, there's little that we can do to do anything about it until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. The minute we can begin to go, there's something in play here. I don't know what it is, but I want to start discovering what it is. That's the gateway to beginning to do things differently. Until I notice how failing to notice shapes my thoughts and deeds, there's little that I can do to change. Okay? Now, what I don't want to do here is have this just be a didactic presentation. I want you to actually experience a couple of things. So, everybody on your feet. And very simply and very quickly, in silence, I want everybody to move to that side of the room. All right. Good. Check the box. Task accomplished. Okay? You guys follow directions well. Now, here's your task. You're going to be measured in terms of how successful you are in completing this. Your future depends on your ability to do this and do this well. Okay? Here's the task. It's actually quite simple. You're going to move from that side of the room to that side of the room, one person at a time. Now, before you begin, sounds simple at first blush. You have to go across this room in some way that is different than anybody that has preceded you. Going across the room to the other side is your task. Doing it differently than anybody that has preceded you is the criteria of success by which you will be measured. Now, as soon as you cross the room and you get over to this side, what you do is you start watching people coming across. And if you see anybody doing it exactly like you did, say, whoa, go back, go back. You become the judges. Okay, that's the simple task. I will get out of your way. Begin, one person at a time. I have, and it's interesting. How many of you had fun? Yeah. How many of you, when I first said, cross differently than anybody else before you has gone, how many of you had something that went, oh my God? How many of you had that? You felt it? It was just automatic, just kind of, whoop, this thing flipped up. How many of you got excited about the possibility of doing it differently? Okay. Those of you that waited near the end, as it got closer and closer to your turn and you were, a lot of people had gone in front of you, what was going on in your heads at that point? Yeah, I was running out of options. I got to start looking for things. Yeah, there's another way to do this. What would it be? I mean, all of this stuff starts to come into play. Person that went across first to market. How I do it makes no difference at all as long as I get there. Okay? And that's true second, third, and fourth oftentimes. But here's where this gets interesting. When you start looking at organizations, and every organization is represented by a pyramid in some way, shape, or form, there's a couple of things that come into play here. Organizations start with a vision, and the vision is the why. This is the why. This is what we're doing out there. What makes it, for the sake of what do we do the activities that we do? Then time is spent taking a look at the strategy, the what. What gets sequenced? What course of action do we actually want to embark on first? And then there are the tactics. It's the how we do what we do. Now, where this is important, and you'll notice that there's 2 levels underneath this. We're not going to talk about those right now. I'll come back to those in a minute. But the top 3 on this are where almost everybody will focus. What's the vision? What's the strategy to execute in order to get to that vision? And then tactically, operationally, day to day, what do we need to do? Checkbox, that sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with that. You absolutely need to have it. And if that's all the further that you work, you're missing incredible opportunities to be successful. As a matter of fact, you're likely not going to be successful long term if this is the only dynamic that you work with. So when we look at this, take this a little bit further. You've got a vision out here. How many of you have a vision for what you'd like to have in your life? Everybody better have their hand up by now. Okay? Now, you also have some intentionality behind that, right? I have the intention of making this happen. Sandy's been talking about visioneering. Bob's been talking about discipline. All of these things come into play. I have the intention to make this vision real. Bob was talking after lunch, though, about how things fade away. He also mentioned this, as you saw, the dream disappear, the dream disappear, the dream disappear when we are in a contractive state. Here's what happens here, is we start getting focused on mechanism. We start getting focused on the how. And the how begins to become the master. If I can only figure out the how, then I could get where I want to go. Now, that's not to say that the how isn't important. But if I look at this as a formula, the mechanism is going to be the least important part of this. Standing over here on this side of the room, moving to that side of the room, if you were fixated on only 1, 2, or 3 ways of getting across the room, you would have been dead in the water. You would have still be standing on the other side. How often do we get hamstrung by what we think needs to be in place before we can move? How often do we get hamstrung before we actually start doing things because we don't know if it's right or not? How many of you would, well, I'll put it this way. How many of you like to be right? Yeah. Most people would rather be right than get what they say they want. And right has a very specific definition in the work that I do. Right is a function of paradigm. Right is a function of belief systems. How do you know when you're right? It's when the world and everything in it is operating in accordance to how you think it, keyword here, should be. That is your paradigm speaking to you. And most people would rather have their paradigm running, and this is where it's out of sight, out of mind. They're not noticing it, but they have this experience of, I'd rather be right. Everybody fold your arms real quick. That feels good, right? Now do it the other way. You have to stop and think about that a little. This is the wrong way to do it. This is the right way to do it. Right is about comfort. Right is about familiarity. Right is about, I know how to do this. Even if it's not getting me what I want, I know how to do it. So we will default to it. And that becomes problematic when we start looking at how we go about creating success in life. What we want to be able to do is recognize that there is a link here, but it's not the link that we think that we actually think it is. Mechanism is not where we want to be focused. Mechanism is not where we want to be focused. Mechanism needs to be replaced in your mind with attention. Energy follows attention. It doesn't follow intention. Energy will follow attention, not intention. And if your attention begins to move towards what are the mechanisms that I need to be mastering in order to get where I'm going, you take your attention off of where you're going. And you end up stuck. You end up stuck. Very good friend of Bob's and mine, a woman by the name of Mary Morrissey. I love something that again, notice what you're noticing. Notice what you're noticing. Notice what you're noticing. And the interesting thing about this is oftentimes what we're noticing is out of awareness. Out of awareness. I notice that I'm feeling something funny right now. If I stop and pay attention to that, I notice what I'm noticing. Why am I noticing that? What has been triggered in me? Because my body is mind. My body is a living sculptor of my belief systems. It literally is. My body is a living sculpture of my belief systems. And physiologically, sensationally, if I'm paying attention, I will start getting cues and clues about what's going on out there that I can begin doing something about. I start noticing. And then in the awareness, I can do something different. How I describe something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it drives my behavior. When I'm brought into organizations, oftentimes it's because the CEO, the leader of the organization, want people to behave differently so that they can get a different result. So the focus is on behavior change. Stupid place to focus. How many of you are married? How many of you have been in a significant relationship at some point in your life? How many of you have ever tried to change the other partner and been successful? Trying to change somebody else's behavior is crazy. It seldom will work. Work on the description process. How I'm describing something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it creates the behavior. So part of what I want to do when I'm leading an organization is work with people to understand how they are describing to themselves what's going on in the environment. What's going on out there. Change the description, I will by default change the behavior. That's what we want to be able to work with. Now, the idea here has to do with what comprises description. That's where the rest of this model comes in. Awareness. What are the paradigms that are operating in the organization today? What are the operational paradigms with the people that comprise the culture of my organization? I'm working with a large multi-billion-dollar company right now, the CEO, and his 4 direct reports that are operationally responsible for the company. And I, last month, introduced to the 4 operational leaders a reading that I wanted them to do, The Power of Assumption. Yeah, Neville Goddard. Just read The Power of Assumption, and they're going, why? I go, don't worry about that. Just begin reading to yourself daily The Power of Assumption. Now, what they don't know is that next month, they're going to start reading it to each other. And in the noticing of that reading, they're going to start noticing what's going on in their organization that they can trace back to their consciousness, the assumptions that they're bringing to life in the organization. Leadership causes movement. Most leaders look externally for the movement, not internally. What are the assumptions that I'm leading with that are being manifested out into my organization? That's where we go. And here's where this gets to be particularly interesting for me. Employee engagement is the holy grail of almost every organization that I've ever worked with. How do we get our people to own what we're doing, to feel alive in what we're doing? And it has to do with access to spirit. Access to spirit. When the company was founded, it was founded on some mission that was alive. It was alive. And that aliveness, that spirit, people were attracted to it. The customers were attracted to the service or the offering because it was imbued with spirit. And if it was strong enough, it became viable. All of a sudden, there was a market for what you were offering. And then what you started to do was build a business around it. And you had a mission that had a business as a delivery mechanism, a mission with a business. There reaches a point in almost every organization's life cycle where the business becomes more important than the mission. The decisions that are made are about the viability of the business and not the mission. And it morphs from being a mission with a business to being a business with a mission as an afterthought. At that point in time, you may as well just get ready to turn the lights out, and it's going to be all over at some point in time. If you can keep the mission in front, that's where it becomes alive. That's where innovation lives. Now, I came across this quote the other day. Imagination lives at the threshold of spirit. Imagination lives at the threshold of spirit. That's where we want to work. You're going to do the vision, strategy, tactical piece, but you want to be able to work at the junction of paradigm and spirit. Spirit wants to emerge. Spirit wants to express. Paradigm will put a cap on it, or it will enable it. You're always going to have a paradigm structure. You're always going to have this moving. And the key here is movement. In the spirit, Troward's work, entering into the spirit of it, we talk about being in a position to give as the first move. We want to be able to put out as the first move. What we're putting out is spirit. What we're making possible is spirit to express itself. If the organization starts moving towards receiving as the first move, which is, by the way, what most organizations do, with a focus on quarterly results, with a focus on the bottom line, what am I going to get, as opposed as, what am I going to give? What do I get to do? The operational question when you're working with spirit in an organization is, what do we get to do? What do we get to do as a possibility? What do we get to do because we're here? Not what do we get, but what do we get to do? That question, if you can get it in front of yourself on a regular basis and in front of your people, starts to compel some very interesting answers. It starts to call forth some very interesting things. What do we get to do? For the sake of what are we doing what we're doing? For the sake of what? You move into imagination at that point. And imagination is inspirational, it's energetic, and it requires tending. It requires conscious noticing. Every one of us runs the risk of moving from mission to business through the transition into business with mission. Yes, the business is important. Yes, you need to make money, but profit is the secondary purpose of business. The primary purpose of business is to enhance the quality of living on this planet. And we do that by giving. We do that by expressing. We do that by bringing out aspects of spirit where people can connect and they go, I want to be a part of what you're up to. Whether it's your service or your product, I want to buy it, I want to play with it, I want to engage with you, and away we go. That's where it gets exciting. That's where it gets to be a lot of fun. Paradigm, stealing one of Bob's slides here. Mental program that has almost exclusive control over our habitual behavior, and almost all of our behavior is habitual and it's unnoticed. It is out of awareness. You want to be able to bring it up, and the way you do that is by noticing. Not by judging it, not by any blaming facility at all, but by noticing. And then you move into imagining what could be. And you use the imagination as the catalyst. The driver on it and the fuel for it is giving. How can we give more of who we are? How can we give more of what we have? Those questions spark all kinds of interesting conversations in the organization, and what you end up doing is causing some movement. Nothing happens until something moves. When you're standing over here on this side of the wall, you just have to start. You just have to start going across. And you may not know what you're going to be doing until you get 3 or 4 steps into it. But the fact that you're moving, you enter into the spirit of it. You enter into the spirit of it just by the fact that you step out and you take the risk You don't have to know how. All you have to do is know where. Where am I heading? Most people don't know that. Most organizations have lost sight of that. You here in the Matrixx, that is not your issue. You know where you're going. What you need to be able to do, though, is keep it alive. Keep entering into the spirit of it. That's the key. That really is truly the key. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bob. And